Dell, picture this, if you will. Let's be in a, I don't know, in a cafe in the hood, and it is slam poetry night. I need you to slam poetry, a little poem on how the show about Moesha is going to go today.
Poorly.
Today on Pilot Pass, Moesha! I'm so thrilled to finally be doing Moesha with you. Moesha was a show on UPN back in our youth that I hold fondly in my heart.
That's
and
right.
Dell holds it in a certain way as well, would you say?
It holds a certain place in my memory.
Yes.
In a way that genocide does.
There was not a lot of Jewish people in this show.
However,
No,
that's from Taxi to Moesha. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of polar opposites there. Moesha is the story about Moesha and her family and all that comes along with it. I don't even know where to start, Del. I'm just going to...
Why don't you
first
give you some background on the show?
Okay. So let's...
So originally it was ordered as a pilot for CBS 1995 through 1996. That's where on the last episode of Taxi, I was mistaken. It was never aired, though. They declined it after the pilot, and it was taken over to UPN. But no, so Moesha is a show based on the singer-performer Brandy, and she plays the young daughter of a car salesman who sales at a Saturn dealership and later comes to own the Saturn dealership. They're living very middle upper class lifestyle. She has a younger brother, and as we learn the pilot of the show, it is her mother passed away 3 years ago, and recently in the last 3 or 4 months, one of her teachers has moved in and is now dating the father,
the dreaded stepmom.
The evil stepmom. Now, the show has a lot in common tone-wise with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Of basically, there's a new member of the family being added to an upper class Black family. That's generally how white people were thought of in the sitcoms. You'll notice it's not a show like a Different World or something like that. This is along with the Huxtables, the Cosby Show. This was upper class Blacks doing well in their neighborhood.
They would give a Huxtable shout out in this first episode. So it's definitely synergy.
Yes, they actually do. That's right. They do. They actually call them the Huxtables. So it is very much we're not looking at The Wire. We're not looking about what's happening in the, poor and lower parts. This is definitely an upper class family that occasionally has to deal with some issues of being Black. But not in this first episode. In this first episode, it's about her dealing with her new stepmom, trying to learn to respect her, and the stepmom trying to get respect, and also hiding the fact that she has a boyfriend from her father who has not allowed her to date until she's 16. So her heart gets broken. Anna Zit. And she has her group of friends. She seems to be very well liked in the show. At her school and some of the places they visit afterwards. And clearly she has no problem attracting men in the show. And her heart gets broken because the guy she has been dating for the entire the entire show pilot
7 days. I believe it's 7 days they've been together.
7 days. Yeah. He finds out that she's grounded because she talked back to her stepmother, who's been given more authority by the father. She kind of pulls him aside. I guess most of the show is just introducing Brandy and her everyday normal life. It starts with her writing in her diary. She goes on and it's just her with her friends, a little bit of her family. It's been shown that for the last 30 years, she wakes up early. It's taken the place of her mother and has been the one to make breakfast for her younger brother, a male friend of theirs that obviously lives nearby, who's the Jazzy Jeff of the group, and her father. And this morning she wakes up and rushes into the kitchen to find that breakfast has already been made by the stepmom. And so she feels a little bit like she's losing what, she's earned in this family, being like the mother figure and opposite the father. And now she's kind of having a hard time returning back to just being a kid again, and giving up some of that responsibility and being held responsible by somebody above her other than her father.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It does switch on her. Like she has this responsibility of taking care of the family before, and then her personal life, she can do whatever she wants. Basically, your dad's not going to stop her. And then by the end, it switches, and now she has less of that responsibility, but she has to take her regular life more seriously because the stepmom is going to be on her about it. And as we go
But she
through the
also gets
series,
back to be, but she also gets back having her childhood again.
yeah,
You know, she doesn't have to worry as much. And that's kind of the trade-off that she's not either used to or possibly is worried about taking back. And it also, by the end of the episode, I guess just say so the stepmother grounds her. She can't go to the slam poetry contest that night or contest or performance or whatever. This guy that she's been dating for a week is at. And when he finds out she's grounded, she sneaks out only to arrive just in time for him to watch him perform this song that he's already written about this poem. He's written about her called Secret Love. But after he's done reading it, he goes over and starts making out with another girl. So, of course, her heart gets broken. And she goes home. And, of course, she's in much bigger trouble with the stepmom. And the stepmom notices that this isn't a normal reaction. She's obviously crying and very upset. And so she kind of turns onto that motherly figure of, okay, you're in trouble. That's fine. What's wrong? What's really happening? I'm supposed to be starting to be your mother. I want the responsibility. I want the respect and authority. Well, now she's got to hand the trade-off of that also means helping her as a mother. And so when she's explained, she kind of helps Moesha through it. And they agree not to tell her father that she's been dating. So they get a little bit of a bond there where they're keeping something from the father that Brandy or Moesha's, are dating and, making out with guys. And so they have a little bond there by the end of the first episode, something that's their own little secret. Of course, as she walks away, she goes, but you're still grounded. And we close on the episode with Moesha laying in her bed. She finds out she's been grounded for a month. And she seems to be handling stuff a lot better. And she asks, was this true love? Was this her first love? Well, considering the guy cheated on her, no, this was probably her first jerk.
All right. Does a beautiful overview. We all know the story. Let's get into this. I'm so excited. I'm going to tell you my personal experience with this because I remember when this first aired on the UPN, I was very excited about it because I was a big fan of said UPN. And
it was no platypus, man.
There was a parent-teacher conference that night at the school. And so I wandered over there for a little while. I met up with Wilena. We hung out. I
remember that now.
And then I wandered home and I watched Moesha. And I don't know what my expectations were, but I certainly enjoyed this community. Like I was like, I'm all in already just because I really kind of... I saw things in them that I kind of look forward to, and there are things that I wanted to do. Slam poetry was not one of them. However, that was a little odd to me. But I will tell you, even as
there's no one that likes slam poetry, even slam poetry artists. They're all lying to each other.
Frito Star is a character that comes along. He becomes her boyfriend at some point in time, and I looked up to him so much. I loved his style. I loved his energy. He was in a band called Onyx, and he just had this otherworldly energy to me. He was the new Tupac to me. It never happened for him, but I always kind of hoped that for him. For myself. So there you go. Parent-teacher conference for me. How about you, Dale? What was your experience like with Moesha?
It's so weird that this is like a nexus point in time because you can actually remember that day. And I did too, because we obviously both watched it live. I was like, where I was a latchkey kid, during school, I was living with my mother. So we had a little ranch out in East Texas. So we would get home from school. We weren't going back to the parent-teacher conference,
right.
At least not for when I was this age. Not when I was older and we had cars and stuff, we would just hang around and wait and then whatever. But by this point, we were home by 3:30, 4 o'clock. I was watching my DuckTales and my Darkwing Duck. And so my mother came home, obviously was at that would go to the conference and then would come home. And of course, I wanted to spare her the horror of what I had seen. So I didn't mention that Moesha had come on, which my mom would not have cared about the show anyway, just would not have cared at all. My sister watched it though, and she loved it. She liked it a lot. She thought all the characters were very cool, very hip and sassy. And I will say this, when I rewatching the pilot, they were using some lingo that I thought wasn't used until a little later. Like they're talking about, oh God, I wish I'd written some of these down, but they're like, the equivalent of like, check out with your boy, or boom. So God, I wish I really could remember them because I'm like, whoa, I thought that wasn't until like early 2000s. So obviously I'm an old white man way behind on catchphrases that have now become famous again as we get older and are using them to my
Bring
daughter.
it back. Yep.
There were this. It's like retro now. How old this is. I will say that I immensely disliked this show when I first watched it. I've said it before, and when I got to the end, this was probably the first time I ever had watched a show as a pilot. I've watched plenty of other shows and not enjoyed them. This is the first time I watched a show and went, huh, TV can be bad. Like bad. Like, not only do I not want to ever watch another one of these episodes again, I'm mad that I watched that one. And I was angry. And this was like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was one of my favorite shows of all time. So maybe I was thinking it was supposed to be something more like that. I'd watched every episode of The Cosby Show up until that point. You know, I maybe I just expected something different, and it was a little more. But I mean, Will Smith was a famous, rapper and artist,
Right.
and so I can't say that that's what turned me off to it. Maybe it's the fact that I knew who Will Smith was and I didn't know who Brandy was and didn't care and still don't care, sorry about Brandy, even though I've heard some of her music. It's just okay. Like, it doesn't stick with me at all. And I'm obviously not her audience, a 40-year-old white man. Even back then, I probably wasn't her audience, of a
You were pretty much a 40-year-old white man back then too.
A 14-year-old white kid living out in East Texas. I almost certainly was not her type, but my sister loved it, and
Yet
a lot of people did.
This was
And
my
I just
avenue,
did
man. I
not
just fell in
get
love
it.
with UPN after that. Like, this became my station just because they began to have programming like this on. I thought that.
Well, they had other weirder shows like Palladius Man and a few things like that were just weird. And
Yeah.
it was like almost how Fox had dethroned, NBC and ABC. Well, NBC originally knocked ABC, and then Fox comes and knocks the big three. And then UPN, I thought, was going to have more of a cultural impact, because you did see more people of color. You did see edgier shows. You did see people that you would not normally get to see on the big four by that point. Because even by that point, like, The Simpsons was still going strong, really strong. And Fox was still known as the bad boy of the group. But UPN was now this new outlier of outliers, of people that, it wasn't for being raunchy or naughty. It wasn't for being, CSI Miami old people like CBS. And it wasn't just kind of the two classics, NBC and ABC.
It was urban programming. I don't like that term.
It was.
That's what they were looking at, was urban programming.
Well, it was meant to be derogatory, obviously. And you had a bunch of the same people that pop up now being like, I don't understand why we need black TV shows to have other shows on them. But shut up, just not everything's for everybody. And let people write stuff for themselves. Like, if black people want to make a show about a black family in this group, let them. Not everything has to be directed towards white dudes. Let people have what they like.
That's true, but I want to talk on Oh, go ahead.
It was the United Paramount Network, so it's Paramount Studios, their television division.
So let's talk about that idea in a broader sense, not just for white audience or something like that, but just how a sitcom is put together. This is a very basic premise of how they set up a sitcom. They've been doing this since the 40s and 50s on how they do that, but it was approached in a different way because we have a different type of family involved in that. Was that one of the reasons that you didn't enjoy it, because it's just kind of a cookie cutter sitcom cutout?
Maybe. I will say with this, and as watching it again today, I will say this. I actually enjoyed it this time around. I didn't think it's a great show. I still don't think it's a great show. I don't think it's anything outstanding in its feel. I don't think it breaks any ground. Like, I think Fresh Prince did bring a lot of white people to the table to watch a black family, just like with the Cosby Show, that a lot of people just would have been like, oh, it's a show about black people, I'm just not even going to watch that. Where those two shows definitely brought people on board. I don't think this did, but maybe it did. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this. But like Taxi, we just talked about, this one honestly felt like it just dropped you in. It didn't feel like a pilot. It felt like you were already supposed to kind of know who all these characters were. Most sitcoms would have had the setup of the stepmother moving in on the first day, or he just meets the stepmother in the first episode as they go to a parent-teacher conference. So it's already been a couple of months of this routine. It's when it starts with, this is the first day that she's not responsible for the family in the morning. That's the only thing different, but that's enough to kick off. Well, now we have to kind of stop ignoring the elephant in the room and address this relationship that you and I are going to have together, and the new family dynamics. And so it's interesting that that's the kickoff for the show, is the family dynamics are going to begin changing now. but no introduction of any new characters. There's no, even the newest character has been there for months. And just like with Taxi, I think I'm really starting to appreciate when a show does that well, because you could have buried this 2 or 3 seasons in and I wouldn't have known the difference.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like that first initial setup of a show where everything's a little wonky. They don't quite know who fits together. They haven't figured out, dynamics. I will say this, her dynamics with her friends felt incredibly natural. Like if you told me that they were friends in real life and she had just brought them on the show, I would absolutely believe you. I mean, it feels like most of these people have known each other for quite a while. And I will say this as a testament to her as a performer. And I know people are always like, oh, I can't believe they can act too. Dude, if you're a performer, you learn to act. I mean, if you're a singer and a bass player on stage, you're in front of people, you learn how to manipulate your body and your facial features. Even if you can't memorize lines, you're portraying something on stage. And so that always irritates me that people are so shocked people can act. She was a very good actor for her age at the time. I really bought this character immediately, Moesha. From the very first scene, I thought she was pretty much flawless. Like I thought she did a great job. The little brother irritated me. He's one of those kids
that's the
that
kind of character that they were trying to do.
Well, what I mean is that the actor, you got natural kids like Haley Joel Osment, where they get what acting is somehow at a young age, and they go, oh, I'm just that person, and they just be that person.
Yeah.
And there's other people that are like, there's kid actors that just read the line without understanding that they're supposed to be different.
What's my motivation?
He definitely felt like that guy. Now he's a kid. I'm not obviously going to pick on a kid like that, but that was just of everybody else that was clearly doing a really great job acting, honestly. He was the only one that it felt like they cast somebody his own kid. Like he felt like he was reading lines and trying to remember to deliver the lines rather than just deliver the lines of his character.
I felt like it was more that was the type of kid that they were thinking about at that time and maybe put that on him rather than that's necessarily what he was trying to do, because that was kids that we were seeing at the time. Kind of that a little bit of annoying, a little bit over the top kind of stuff. Del, I've got a new segment for you today. And the segment is, let's talk about TV shows with diaries involved.
Oh my gosh. Well, the obvious one, The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer, which is right there in the title.
That's very true indeed. Do you remember the show that kicked this off? I have an idea, but I hope you can go back further than me. So what do you think was the first show to be able to do that?
The one I remember, honestly, is Doogie Howser.
Oh, okay.
Because he would type on his computer because it was new. Like, ooh, this kid's so smart. He's in school. He's a kid with a computer. No kid has it. What would a kid ever need a computer for? Oh, he's so smart. He's a doctor. Of course he would have a computer. Like, that's the first one I remember is Doogie Howser keeping a diary every day.
I was hoping you'd go back further because I didn't do enough research to get the real answer on this. But my answer was Mr. Belvedere. Right. I mean, Mr. Belvedere almost with the same kind of feeling and emotion as Moesha does. Like, they would go in the room and write in the diary. And that's, that's kind of what she did in the pilot episode. So that was my first thought, but it had to happen before then.
No,
Bob Newhart do it? I don't know.
I just watched the Newhart show the other day too. Here's the thing is, I'm pretty sure Anne Frank did it before either of those.
She was pretty good at that,
shows. That literally is the Diary of Anne Frank.
She was notorious for that, as it were.
Yes, exactly. I can't think of.
It's such a unique trait of TV shows that your main character does that, so you can kind of talk back to the audience.
It seems like I remember either it's the Canterbury Tales, which is the story within a story of someone is like, I'm going to tell you the story. I mean, obviously Hamlet has the play within a play, but maybe it's not Midsummer's Night's Dream. There's the one where basically, Romeo and Juliet, it's not a diary, but basically someone says, hey, I'm going to tell you this story. And the story is Romeo and Juliet. And then there's the whole play. And then the guy comes back out. So I guess I would have to go back almost as far as like Greek plays to begin with. The idea of the chorus comes out and says, we are going to show you what we're going to show you.
Right.
Then the show happens and then they go, now we're done. But part of that is the chorus is part of the story that you're watching. So I would say it would have to be at least as old as that. Surely there's got to be a Greek play like Aristophanes or something where a character is keeping a diary. I bet one of his comedies, like The Frogs.
Knock on the roof there and be like, hey, she'll tell you.
I would think Aristophanes, like The Frogs or something. There's got to be one where his character is writing a story within the story. There has to be.
I had a lot of favorite moments from this pilot episode, but I think my favorite part of the pilot episode is that the dad is a Saturn salesman. Like that
Yeah,
specificity. Obviously,
that was
Saturn was
yeah,
probably a
that was
sponsor, I would
so
guess, and just
yeah, that was so
Saturn's at the
weird to
time
me.
was it's so of that period.
That caught me too when he goes, well, I'm off to the, he didn't say car, I think he says, I'm off to the car dealership. Hey, if I sell just 2 more Saturns this month, we'll maybe be able to afford that house in upstate. Okay, well, I'm off to the Saturn dealership. And then later somebody's like, well, you'll have to sell enough Saturns to reach from here to Saturn. And I'm like, did they just make him a Saturn dealer to get that one joke about selling enough Saturns to go from here to Saturn?
I hope so.
Or did Saturn sponsor it? This word is starting to lose all meaning as I say it so many times, but like, it was just such a weird, like they particularly placed that brand name for either a joke, which wasn't very funny, or for money, and it was so awkwardly placed, like they didn't do anything clever with it. I want to know that now because that actually stood out. That was the one thing I went, hold up. Like that took me out of the moment of the show. And I will say this, I thought I was going to I'm not feeling great this weekend, so I don't have anything to drink, but I thought this would be a perfect one because I know you and Catherine and a few other people really like it when I get tipsy and I watch something that I don't like. Because if I get tipsy and I watch something I like, I tend to just enjoy it.
Right.
But when I get tipsy and watch something I don't like, I tend to get very animated and vocal about it. Yes. And I get myself all wound up, and it's very entertaining to a lot of people. And honestly, it's an entertainment for myself too, because it is fun to hate on things when there's no real consequences for it, but this one, no, you know what? It was fine. I think that when I was younger, I was just, I don't know. I think that somehow I was expecting something a little closer to Fresh Prince. Maybe it was because of the fact that I'd say this, but she was female, and as a young boy, I felt like I couldn't identify with the female in the show. So I'm trying to think of any other shows that starred females that when I was younger, I could identify with. Now, obviously now I can watch a show with anybody and it doesn't matter because I'm going to try to relate to that person as a human. But maybe I was just dumb enough to be, not misogynistic, but maybe that's had something to do with it, because you can't say it's the fact that they're black, because obviously I like tons of black shows. It wasn't the fact that they were upper middle class black people. Well, I like plenty of shows like that too. So what this was that put me off, I'm really trying to struggle with, because it was not a bad written show. It was a well acted show. The jokes weren't anything to write home about, but I mean, it's no Taxi, but I've watched plenty of other shows where the jokes are just supposed to be written in there as jokes. And it was touching. I felt bad for her when she got cheated on and she came home and she's having to deal with this issue, because I've had to deal with a few step parents before. And, that's a hard transition in life. And I really honestly I felt bad for her when realizing, wow, after 3 years, this dynamic's going to change. You got another person that can yell at you, another person that can ground you. All of a sudden, this person who you see at school and as a teacher. And so normally this would be somebody you'd like tease or make fun of behind their back, or somebody you'd make jokes about with your other fellow students. Now you have to learn to be respectful of them, even in a public environment, at school or something. You can't make fun of, Miss Jones if you're going to go home with Miss Jones that night. And also they're not your biological parent, because we had plenty of students, obviously, whose parents taught in our schools. And didn't your mom teach?
Mm-hmm. Yep, she did for a little while.
Okay, yeah, your mom taught. But that's different because you see them as your parent first, and you go to school and you just happen to see your parent at school. The idea of going, like, it's like having your boss marry into your family. That's just got to be a weird, transition. And you know what? I bought it. I now watching it a little later on in life, maybe it was too advanced for me. Maybe I didn't catch all the dynamics of it. Maybe I just went, oh, it's a girls show. And that was enough for me to turn me off.
I wouldn't call it a very special episode, but I would call it just this side of a very special episode for a pilot, which was, again, kind of strange that they, the stepmother angle was pretty serious and it was pretty heavy. And, that was things that people were dealing with at the time that they weren't really talking about in sitcoms and on TV.
Yeah.
The Huxtables have been together forever. They were a family unit that was just, together, and, we know how that turned out, but that's beside the point. Go ahead, Del.
Well, either you had the stable married one, or you always had the one parent whose other family member had died, and he was raising the kids, or she was raising the kids alone.
My
You
two
know, the
dads.
idea of introducing, the idea of introducing a step parent was, even up until the '90s, was a little,
Yeah.
Something they didn't know if you wanted to kind of do. And I don't know
Risque.
why. I don't know why on earth they would ever freaking be, even in the '60s. That just seems like a ridiculous thing.
You know
But
why? Because the Christian right is the ones that write the letters, and even if it's 10 of them, they're going to get our shows taken away because of that.
And people, if you don't know this, the FCC, how it works is you're not fined for doing anything as long as it's accepted by your community. And so what that means is it's regional. So what'll happen is, like, let's say somebody drops the F-bomb. If nobody in the whole city of Dallas cares and complains to the FCC, they don't get fined. You don't get fined by the FCC unless somebody makes a complaint, and then they look into it and find that you did it. If no one complains, the FCC, even if they were watching it, cannot fine you. So there are people, instead of just leaving well enough alone, there are people that will watch TV from other areas they don't live in and write in a letter to complain that, hey, over in that city, that in a state that I don't live in, they taught, had a show about this or used this, language or this word, and that offended me, and that place will get dinged for it.
Mhm.
However, that's not supposed to happen the way. The whole reason the FCC is set up is so that you're supposed to have programs that are applicable to your region and area and are approved by your group, people that live around you. So the idea that, and unfortunately, that there are people that do this, that just sit like Ned Flanders. They actually did a whole episode of this of The Simpsons one time. He has people mail him videotapes from other cities so that he can watch them and then write letters to the FCC to get these places fined. And it's just, it's sad that people have no life, and I think they're protecting kids. But if your parents aren't complaining, I don't think somebody else's parents do too. But just, hey, there's your little lesson for how the FCC works.
There you go.
You don't actually get fined for doing something wrong. If we say the word fuck, we're not on the air. But yeah, you can say fuck. Actually, it turns out you can say fuck as long as you don't talk about the act of intercourse and use it as an adverb or an adjective. It's actually not anything wrong, because it's considered a heightened word. It's like using very, so like, that was fucking great. You actually can't get fined for that, even if you say it on the air. But if you use it in a derogatory way about the act of sex itself, yes, you can get fined. And that's another lesson for you people. Look at that, turning into Moesha. It's a very special episode of Pilot Pass.
Did you have a favorite character from this first episode?
Yeah, Moesha. Honestly, I liked her. I don't know what turned me off to this so bad when I first watched it. I mean, for 20 something years have said this was the worst pilot I've ever seen in my entire life. And I can say for sure, absolutely, after watching a bunch of stuff on Netflix, that even Netflix has released, there have been far, far worse shows created. This was fine. There's nothing, not only not offensive about it, but it was good. I don't know why I had such a problem with this. Then maybe I saw it as a female show and I just didn't understand the character. Maybe I bonded too much with the male characters and was, going, why is she being that crazy over that? She's the one that couldn't show up to his performance. I don't know. I honestly, I've got to plead youthful ignorance on this.
Hakeem was my guy. He got all the best lines. He'd just show up on a few scenes. You get to eat the free food. I loved him anytime.
And can we talk about again, just like the Cosmo Kramer, the DJ Jazzy Jeff, who doesn't lock their houses? Like, nobody's left in the morning yet, right? So they're all having breakfast and he walks in from outside. Now,
Corey Ando would do that at my house all the time. So it was a thing that happened.
Well, but he probably didn't he have a key or something? I think I had a key to Corey's place as well. Oh, okay.
No, he would just walk in.
To be fair, we both know Gabby. Great friend of ours. He has walked straight in plenty of times, although sometimes I'm not really sure if he knows which house he's in after a few drinks. That's the gentleman I believe we talked about before. That's fallen off every porch of every house I've ever lived in. He's fallen off every porch at least once out of every house.
We've come to it. I think you just alluded to it, but I want to make sure it's on record that Dell says, based on the pilot episode of the show called Moesha, would you recommend this show?
Even today, no, only because I don't see it as anything. I still don't see it as important or that it did anything unique that would even now, like I'm not going to watch the second episode. There was nothing about it that encouraged me to continue with these characters. But I will say that I was very foolish by hating it so much for so many years. Now, this is something I will probably absolutely show my daughter. I think she will like this show. And I think she's 12 now. So she's just starting to hit that age where Moesha is going to be very cool to her, the older girl, my daughter's, biracial. And so I think this will be something this is a character that I would feel very comfortable for her looking up to. And so I probably will introduce my daughter to the show, and maybe it'll be something we watch together, but I still don't think it's something that I would continue watching on my own. So let me put it this way. I don't think it offers anything culturally as far as I can tell. However, that certainly doesn't mean that plenty of other people won't find something that it does offer to them. So on this one, you know what? I'm going to stand back and go, I'm a 40-year-old white dude watching a show from the 90s with a black, female lead. You know what? I'm going to throw up my hands and say, don't ask me.
There was a lot of cultural things that I thought about when we watched this, but then also realized let's just not. That's the podcast after dark. We'll talk about it. I recommend it because
You've always been a fan of this show.
I'm a sucker for this show. I don't know why. Again, I think the culture was something that I was really into when I was this age. I love the style. I love the dialogue and the language that they were doing. I feel like that was probably the most unique, that you didn't have shows speaking in cultural dialect that wasn't like what Mr. Huxtable, the kind of language that he would use. I really like that.
I will say that was maybe what turned me off, because I didn't get into hip hop and rap. Like I didn't even like the Beastie Boys when I was in high school, which is insane to me now because they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Like they're my top 10 favorite bands ever. And I love the Beastie Boys. Those were white dudes rapping, and I didn't particularly care for them when I was in high school. And so the hip hop culture really back then didn't mean anything to me. It wasn't until I got into college and started being exposed to a lot more stuff, short of Will Smith and Fresh Prince, which again, they very whiteified that family, which was a complaint. I mean, they did it intentionally to bring some audience members in, because they definitely dealt with some episodes like when Carlton wasn't considered black enough.
Yeah.
I remember that was a great episode. And I remember that one sticking with me. Because he had to stand up and say, like, look, just because I dress a little better, we go through the same issues, man. Just because my family's a little better off. I remember that episode really stuck with me. And I started to see culture, the black culture differently like that because of shows like Fresh Prince. And then I got, one of my best friends was a wannabe hip hop artist. And as I started to go to college, and introduced me to Snoop Dogg and got me into the Beastie Boys and Tupac and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden this, and I started to learn about the history of hip hop and DJ Herc and stuff like that, where and now I'm like so appreciative of it, especially as like part of American history. That's like something I'm just like, how could we have America now without hip hop? Like that would be, it would be Nazi Germany. That's what it would
this
be.
guy right here has been rocking cross colors since 7th grade. So I've been repping since back in the day.
You were always a little more hip than me. I'll be honest. I was definitely more rock and roll punk. And I saw that as like, I was one of those elitist, obnoxious knobs. It was like, if it's not rock and roll or punk, or the Kinks, then it's not real music. And then of course now I'm into like, everything from jazz and opera to hip hop or whatever. The only thing, I only have one type of music I still don't particularly care for, and that is orchestral Chinese chamber music. I even tried going back to music classes that I had in college, and I pulled out an old CD I had and I put it on. I was like, 2 minutes in, I was like, I cannot get through this. Like, that's the only type of music I still to this day, and maybe one day I'll grow into that too.
Now that we've got through this episode, will you tell the people how they can find us if they like to look for us and communicate with us on the World Wide Web?
Yes, that would be pilotpasspod.com, which links to all of our social media, including our Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
Why do you hate Instagram so much?
Always forget. Oh, because I never use
scared of Instagram.
Yes. No, I need to download the Instagram account. I know it's the old man version of the TikToks. And I actually know more about TikTok.
We're allowed to have Instagram.
Yeah, there we go. Without looking like pedophiles, we can have Instagram. But TikTok, I don't want anybody knowing that's on my phone. But I know more about TikTok just because my daughter walks in all the time. She's like, look at this 5-minute crafts. I want to make slime. Look at this 5-minute crafts. It's them cutting up a Volkswagen and then reassembling it into a toothbrush. And you're like, first of all, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Second of all, just go buy the toothbrush. You don't need to do 5-minute crafts for everything you need in your house.
Right.
Like I see them destroy things that are worth like $50 to make a $3 item. And I'm like, just stop watching this channel. But I know way more about that just because every day I'm inundated with like TikToks that she shows me. And they're I mean, it's great. My wife's getting into TikTok now because she looks for hair products and stuff like that. And it's crazy. But Instagram, find us on the Instagram is where I meant to say. I will say that this show I haven't felt so old and white as when I was rewatching this episode going, well, maybe I was wrong. When I was younger, boy, this was, yeah. And now that I feel a little more mature and a little more down the road, I definitely, like I said, they were using, like, I'd like to go back to one point where you were saying the terminology, even in Fresh Prince and stuff like that, they weren't saying things like, God, I wish I could remember. Can you remember any of the catchphrases they used?
No, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's stuff that now white people would say all the time. Yeah. And I mean, it's like boom goes the dynamite, essentially something like that. Where like now it's been appropriated by everybody and it's just part of regular speaking. I heard that. I'm like, whoa, that was way back in the day. I didn't even know people in school that were using that term. And of course, maybe here's the reason a lot of people like this. Maybe they were learning new terminology that was coming in from the cities, got on the shows like Moesha, and disseminated to people out in Kaufman, Texas, who were more into hip hop and into hip hop and wanted to learn, new words, new ways of speaking, new ideas, new concepts. So maybe that is a reason to watch, I would say. I mean, now you're learning phrases that are 25 years old at this point, but
they're still new in Kaufman.
Why. Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, it's out in Kaufman. There might be, but you know what? I can see now why this would have been more important back then for a lot of people who are already somewhat interested in that culture to have an excuse almost to be exposed to it at least once a week. That makes a lot of sense to me now.
Until next time, this has been the Learning Channel with Dylan.
That's right. So much today. Everybody grew.
Not in the pants area.